In this video, we'll take a look at a join tool known as the Find and Replace tool. The best way to think about the Find and Replace tool is to picture a very similar operation to a VLOOKUP in Excel. The Find and Replace tool is obviously configured differently to a VLOOKUP and actually has a couple of additional benefits we can take advantage of. So let's take a look at what they are. Firstly, as always, we will need some data. So what I have here are three tables. The first table is our main dataset, which is some information on customers and the amount they owe. We then have two tables which can be thought of as mapping tables. They are tables which will help enrich our main dataset with new information in the same way a VLOOKUP would do. So first things first, let's drag a Find and Replace tool onto the canvas and observe the input anchors that we need to connect to. You will notice that we are presented with an F input and an R input anchor. The F input can be regarded as the data source that contains the main dataset, in which you are trying to look up in order to either replace or to act as a key in a mapping to bring back new columns. The R input anchor will contain the source data that contains the information you are looking to use as the replacement data, or the value you're trying to append to the main dataset. So let's drag our main dataset to the F anchor and the short to long mapping table to the R anchor. If we observe the short to long mapping table, what you can see is that we have a column that is labelled short, which is just an abbreviated way of writing the long version of the word. Now the main dataset actually has this short abbreviated version in the customer column. So our first goal is to replace the short abbreviated text with the full long word. So the first configuration option we need to select is what we are trying to find and whereabouts we expect to find it. So we can select beginning of field, which will look for a string or substring that starts from the beginning of the text. We have any part of field, which means the substring we are looking for could appear at any point of the string. And finally, we have the entire field, which means the entire field will be considered in the search. For this example, seeing as our abbreviated text can appear at any part of the string, we will select any part of field. Now just to the right of this selection, we need to select the Find Within field. So this pertains to the field in the main dataset we are looking within, very similar to the lookup value in an Excel VLOOKUP. So we will select Customer in this instance, as it's the customer field that has the short abbreviated wording in some instances. We can then select what we are trying to find within this field. This selection comes from the R input anchor, and seeing as we want to find the short abbreviation, we need to enter the column short in this example. Now the last thing we need to state here is what we are looking to replace the value with. So seeing as we want to replace all references to the abbreviated word with the long word, we can select the Replace Found Text with Value option and then stipulate that we want it to be replaced with the long column's wording. Now the AND symbol and other abbreviated text may appear more than once in a given field, so we'll also select the Replace Multiple Found Items so we capture these. When we then run the workflow, you can see that wherever there is reference to the short column in the main dataset, we get it replaced with the long word. So ampersand becomes the word and co becomes the word company. Now let's look even closer. Notice here that at the bottom of the raw dataset, we have a customer called Colorado Textile and Varnish, as well as Colorado Depth of the Treasury. Now in the final result, we have actually replaced the first two letters CO with the word company because we're looking up any part of the field and replacing accordingly. Therefore, to address this, we need to actually specify that we want the match to occur on the whole word only, irrespective of where that word sits in the string. So if we select the option Match Whole Word Only and then rerun the workflow, you can now see the bottom two records are being treated in line with expectation, and Colorado remains as Colorado. Okay, great. So I now want to show you how you can generate a new column with values from a mapping table in a very similar way to how a VLOOKUP works. So far, we've seen how to use a mapping table to find a specific string and replace it with a new value. So in this second example, I have a second mapping table which shows us whether the customer in question is related to the government or not. So if a customer has either of the words treasury, revenue, or of transport within their name, they are government related, and we need to tag these rows with a Y. So here, what we can do is connect the datasets to a find and replace tool, and once again, we're going to search any part of the field for the 3 words. We will look within the customer column in the main dataset, and we will find the value from our mapping table which resides in the column called department. Now our incoming dataset is actually in all capitals, whereas the department column is in lowercase, so we'll need to select case insensitive find to ensure we get a match. So irrespective of whether the values are in upper or lowercase, we will get a match if the letters are the same. Now because we want to append a new field and not simply replace, we are this time going to select the Append Fields to Record option, and this is where we now choose what field to append if there is a successful match based on the above configuration. So here we know we want to bring back the indicator which resides in the column called gov_flag. If we now run the workflow and observe the final output, you can see that our main dataset is returned, but this time with a new column called gov_flag, which has a Y that appears in 4 rows. These rows all have something in common. They all contain a word which existed in our lookup. So we have revenue, revenue, of transport, and treasury. So a very similar result to how we would expect a VLOOKUP to work. Great, so 2 common use cases for you to digest. Now the final point I want to mention is that the outputs of the find replace tool will always have the same length of string as the string that was inputted. So if the replacement tool is actually resulting in the string becoming a longer representation than the original dataset, then you may find that the output is truncated. In order to avoid this nuance, you can use a select tool and extend the size of the field so that the additional characters added through the replace tool are included accordingly and are not truncated. So keep this in mind. So hopefully this helps in understanding what the find and replace tool can be used for. Don't let the name confuse you here, as you can not only use the tool to find and replace values in a specific column, but you can look up values in a specific table and bring back new columns by appending it to your result set. Practice it on a few of your own use cases to make sure you understand how it operates in more detail.